Do you believe that your life can change completely because of a simple letter? It seems unlikely, doesn't it? Even more so in today's world, where everything is digital, immediate, disposable. But what if I told you that sometimes what arrives silently carries the power of kindness to completely transform our story? This is the story of Liza, an ordinary woman, full of dreams, fears, hope, and compassion. A person like you and me who thought she understood her own life, until she started receiving anonymous letters that challenged her entire understanding of her past, her family, and even herself. Get ready, because what you're about to see here will make you rethink what we really know about who we are. Many would say to ignore it, throw it away, move on. After all, who in their right mind would open the doors of their heart to something so mysterious and at the same time so intimate? But what few understand is that sometimes it takes courage to look at what we avoid. It takes humility to recognize that we don't know everything. And it takes resilience to face the ghosts that haunt our own roots. When the first letter arrived, Liza could still choose not to get involved. But when the words began to touch her most hidden wounds, she understood that empathy and respect for what we feel are powerful weapons. With each envelope, each sentence, each sigh, she found herself closer to a revelation capable of changing everything. So if you believe that you've already lived through it all, or if you think that your past is something completely resolved, be careful. This story will show you that life always holds surprises, and that sometimes the greatest inspiration comes from places we least expect. Stay until the end, because the truth that Liza discovered, and that you will discover along with her, is not only moving, it is transformative, and it can also, in unexpected ways, illuminate your own untold stories. After all, who has never wondered what they would do if a forgotten secret came knocking on their door, crying out to be heard? She was an ordinary person, the kind you might find in line at the supermarket or sitting on a bench in the park, watching time go by. Her name was Liza, and her life unfolded between the routine of work, coffees shared with a few friends, and Sunday visits to her mother, in an old house that smelled of cornmeal cake and memories. Liza carried in her chest a sweet mixture of hope and insecurity, like someone trying to balance the dreams and disappointments of everyday life with the wisdom that only time and humanity can teach. Recently recovered from the loss of her father, a man with an easy smile and a tight hug, she sought to rebuild her peace through small gestures. Growing plants, reading old novels, writing down random thoughts in a notebook with a blue cover. It was in the simplicity of these moments that she connected with the compassion, affection, and respect that had always guided her upbringing. Still, there were days when loneliness weighed more heavily than usual, and Liza's mind would dive into reflections that mixed fear, courage, and gratitude in unequal doses. On those nights lying in the bed that seemed too big for just one person, she would allow herself to cry quietly, as a form of silent reconciliation with her own history. It was not a lack of strength, but a sincere expression of humanity and perseverance. Liza knew that life was made up of ups and downs, of encounters and farewells, of dreamed adventures and invisible battles fought in silence. Her greatest desire was simple: to build a future guided by honesty, kindness, and the power of goodness that she saw fading away in modern relationships. Little did she know that very soon her peaceful existence would be crossed by a sequence of events that would challenge her deepest understanding of love, family, and forgiveness. It was an ordinary afternoon when change began to creep into the edges of Liza's reality. It was raining lightly, and the wind blew dry leaves along the sidewalk as if announcing the arrival of something new and inevitable. On her way back from work, she passed by the mailbox, a habit as automatic as breathing, and at first didn't even notice the crumpled envelope, with no return address hidden among the usual mail. Perhaps it was just the different feel of the paper, or perhaps the strangely familiar handwriting, that made her stop and stare at the object with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The truth is that small, seemingly insignificant gesture would be the first thread pulled in a tangle of buried secrets. dormant emotions and revelations that would very soon test all her courage, her empathy, and her capacity for resilience. With the envelope still in her hands, Liza climbed the stairs of the building with hesitant steps, like someone carrying a secret without knowing it. She sat down in the living room armchair, took a deep breath, and, with a mixture of courage and insecurity, tore the seal. The letter was handwritten, in a firm but old-fashioned handwriting, like those old letters kept in family trunks. The words, arranged in an almost poetic way, spoke directly to her heart. They mentioned childhood memories, insecurities that Liza had never verbalized, and feelings that she thought were only hers. The feeling of being invaded was as strong as the emotion that took hold of her chest. It was as if someone had put into words her most hidden emotions, those that she barely admitted to herself, mixing hope, fear, and humanity in one surefire blow. At first, Liza laughed, suspicious. She thought it might be a bad joke, perhaps set up by someone close to her. She tried to rationalize, looking for logical explanations. Was someone spying on her? Some distant relative wanting to play a trick on her play? But there was something in those lines that disarmed her. A painful honesty, a sincere compassion that seemed to come from someone who knew her in her essence. It was impossible to ignore the depth of those words, which touched places that not even the closest friendship dared to enter. The letter ended with an enigmatic signature, "The one who never forgot you." That phrase echoed in Liza's mind like an insistent whisper, planting seeds of distrust and curiosity, sowing the ground for an outcome that she could not yet imagine. She put the letter in the desk drawer, but the thought stuck to it like an invisible hook. During dinner, while she watched television or played with her cell phone, it was impossible to shake the feeling that she was being watched. The trust, built with so much affection and perseverance over the years, was now challenged by a silent shadow that whispered unanswered questions. Who would write something so intimate? Why? In search of reconciliation, forgiveness? Or was there something more? That night, Liza slept badly, enveloped in confused dreams and a strange feeling that her life, once so peaceful, was on the verge of an inevitable transformation. What she didn't know was that that first letter would be just the beginning of an adventure where hope, courage, and resilience would be put to the test like never before. In the days that followed, letters became a constant presence in Liza's life. Every morning when she opened the mailbox, there was a new envelope, always without a return address, with the same precise handwriting and the same words full of compassion, sincerity, and humanity. Each new letter seemed to get to know even more of the forgotten corners of her soul. They mentioned childhood fears, moments that not even her mother knew about, like the loneliness she had felt on the first day of school or the silent terror she felt on stormy nights. The feeling of being naked before someone invisible intensified, generating a mixture of fear, curiosity, and hope. It was as if someone were holding her memories in their hands and shaping them with gentleness, but also with a brutal honesty that required courage to bear. Liza tried to maintain her routine, the perseverance that had always been her trademark. But with each new letter, the veil of security tore a little more. At work, her colleagues noticed her distracted gaze, her delayed responses, her increasingly rare smiles. At home, her nights became long vigils of fear and reflection, in which the hope of discovering the truth mixed with the fear of what might be revealed. In some letters, the author spoke of his childhood dreams, that dormant desire to be an artist, to live an adventure in faraway lands, dreams that Liza had buried under the weight of adult responsibilities. It was impossible not to feel moved by the way those words rescued her from herself, reminding her of who she was before the world told her who she should be. As the weeks passed, Liza's psychological tension took hold. Every step she took, every glance out the window, every shadow reflected on the neighborhood walls seemed to carry a secret lurking within. Her confidence in her own perception began to crumble, and loneliness, once an old acquaintance, now seemed like a mocking ghost, laughing at her growing insecurity. Deep down, however, there was a silent strength, fueled by gratitude, altruism, and the hope that by facing her fears, she might find something greater than her own pain. It was an internal struggle between persevering or surrendering, and without. Knowing it, Liza was already being prepared to delve even deeper into a mystery where empathy, the power of kindness and courage, would be her only real weapons. Overcome by anguish and a thirst for answers, Liza decided that she could no longer remain passive in the face of it. She discreetly installed security cameras on her front door, changed her routines for leaving and arriving, and watched her neighbors' every move with a mixture of courage and paranoia. The trust she had always had in her judgment, built with so much respect and perseverance, was beginning to waver in the face of growing insecurity. She tried to maintain her composure, but it was difficult. The letters kept arriving, and each one seemed to dig deeper, bringing up memories, guilt, and even forgiveness that she had never granted herself. The loneliness, which had previously been just a silent shadow, now seemed glaring in her daily existence. At work, Liza began to show signs of wear and tear. Reports, once impeccable, now came with small errors. Meetings, once dominated by charisma and humility, were now moments of tension and distraction. Close friends tried to reach out, offering words of compassion and humanity, but she built invisible walls. The obsession with finding out who was behind the letters consumed her from the inside out. Even in her free time, when she tried to reconnect with small sources of affection and inspiration, like reading a book of old poetry or preparing her favorite dishes, Liza's mind would stubbornly return to the enigmatic messages. It was as if a dark adventure, woven from memories and secrets, was about to explode from within her own past. During long nights, between fear and hope, Liza would make mental lists of possible suspects: childhood friends, old loves, distant relatives. No one seemed to fit completely, but they all carried some frightening possibility. Paranoia began to infiltrate every daily gesture. A bank letter seemed like a threat. A car crash sounded like a veiled warning. The courage that had once defined her now had to be sought deep within her soul, fueled by the resilience she barely knew she possessed. It was like walking on shaky ground, where self-compassion and hard-won wisdom had to become guides. Little did she know the next letter would bring not only more questions, but a turning point so shocking that it would change her journey forever. It was a grey morning, one of those when the wind seems to carry away old secrets, when Liza found the letter that would change everything. Unlike the others, this one came with a small envelope made of yellowed paper, containing an old photo. The image showed an unknown child, with big eyes and a melancholic expression, in front of a house with wide windows and flowery curtains. Liza felt her heart race, a mix of fear, hope, and emotion filling her chest. The note that accompanied the photo simply said, "Not everything has been told to you." The words, although brief, exploded like an avalanche of possibilities, challenging her trust, her understanding, and all the resilience she had been trying to muster to move forward. She sat at the kitchen table, looking at the photo under the dim light of the lamp, as if searching in the past for an answer that she should already know. Every detail seemed to pulse with a life of its own, summoning fragmented memories she had never known she had. It was as if life, with all its humanity and the power of kindness, was about to reveal a new adventure to her, one that would require more courage, selflessness, and humility than any letter before it. Gratitude for the opportunity to know the truth was mixed with irrational fear of what she might find. The photo seemed to whisper old family secrets, and for the first time, Liza had the clear sense that her story was much bigger, more complex, and more painful than she had ever imagined. Determined to find answers, Liza decided she could no longer hold back. It was time to turn curiosity into action, insecurity into strength. Armed with the photo and the enigmatic letter, she began to search through old family albums, forgotten records in dusty boxes, and subtle conversations with relatives she rarely saw. Each discovery was another piece in this puzzle of emotion and inspiration that required quiet wisdom and relentless perseverance. Fear still whispered, of course, trying to convince her to stop. But now there was something stronger. The certainty that understanding her past was an act of respect, compassion, and above all, love. And what she would find by following this path, oh, that was something that not even her most prepared heart could have anticipated. The investigation took Liza to places she never imagined she would revisit. Old forgotten neighborhoods, deactivated churches, dusty archives of notary offices. Each step, although shrouded in fear and insecurity, was guided by a silent courage, fueled by hope and a thirst for truth. After days of searching, in a conversation with a distant cousin, Liza heard for the first time the name that would change everything. A sister she never knew existed. The revelation fell upon her like a flood of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a painful gratitude for finally touching the hidden reality of her story. It was hard to believe, and even harder to accept that silence so full of respect and fear had been present in her family for so long. In search of more answers, Liza confronted her mother in a conversation that mixed tears, forgiveness, and a mutual understanding that only those who have loved deeply are capable of achieving. She discovered that many years before, in a time of extreme poverty and loneliness, her mother had had 2 daughters. Pressured by her family, overcome by shame and insecurity, she had been forced to give up the eldest for adoption. A secret, buried under layers of unlived affection, suffocated humanity and bitter wisdom. The decision, made with the courage that a desperate young woman can muster, was followed by decades of silence and unresolved reconciliation. Hearing this did not erase the pain, but it helped Liza to resignify her own story, and to realize that even the worst decisions can arise from the attempt to protect. Each letter she received now made more sense, as if it were part of a grand plan of forgiveness and reconnection. In her heart, a silent battle was being fought. On one side, anger at the omission; on the other, empathy for the human fragility of those who loved in their imperfect way. Liza understood, with the humility she had acquired through hard work, that life is not always drawn in straight lines. It is made up of unexpected curves, of falls and rises fueled by the power of kindness. She knew that from then on the next step would require not only resilience, but an inspiration as deep as the blood bond that insisted on pulsing even after so many years, and destiny, with its mysterious ability to intertwine paths, still had encounters in store that could change everything Liza thought she knew about herself. It was a silent late afternoon when Liza, armed with the hope and courage she had been cultivating like rare flowers, decided to follow the last clue left in the letters. The note, written with a sincerity that made her heart ache, indicated an abandoned address on the outskirts of the city, an old train station forgotten by time and men. Fear walked side by side with her, whispering insecurities and memories of lonely nights. But there was also a new strength, shaped by resilience, and the understanding of those who understand that certain adventures need to be lived, even if they tremble inside. Each step taken on that floor of broken stones was like a silent pact that affection, humanity, and the search for truth were stronger than any shadow that haunted her past. Upon arriving, Liza hesitated for a moment. The building, covered in graffiti, and dry leaves seemed to hold ancient secrets. Between the broken columns, a female figure appeared, observing her from a distance. She was not a threat. It was as if she were part of that scene, blending in with the abandonment and hope that still hung in the air. When their eyes met, a deep emotion ran through Liza's body. The woman, with sad eyes and a shy smile, carried something strangely familiar in her face. It was a recognition that needed no words. There was love, pain, and a raw sincerity that pierced the soul like lightning. Without knowing how, Liza felt tears welling up, like a river dammed by years of silence and unasked questions. The two remained motionless for a few minutes, as if time had stopped just for that meeting to happen. The woman, holding something in her hands, perhaps a memory, perhaps just hope itself, took a timid step toward Liza. It was a dance of silent reconciliation, marked by mutual respect and the courage to allow oneself to be vulnerable. There, in that forgotten setting, two lives separated by old choices met again. And although Liza's mind was full of questions, her heart already knew the answer. Sometimes, true inspiration comes from encounters that defy logic, but that heal wounds that words could never reach. All that was left now was to listen to the story that her eyes were already beginning to understand. The silence that hung between them was heavy, but full of meaning. When the woman finally spoke, her voice was choked as if she were carrying decades of loneliness, hope, and fear in each word. She was her sister, separated in childhood, taken, far away by desperate decisions, by a fragile humanity that often makes mistakes trying to get it right. The letters were her attempt to reach out without breaking the delicate moment, offering Liza the chance to accept, forgive, and find herself again. Each line written, each memory evoked, was a gesture of courage and compassion, a silent plea for reconciliation. Liza was overcome with emotion as she tried to digest the enormity of that revelation that mixed pain, gratitude, and a strange feeling of completeness. The story was more painful than she could have imagined. Her sister, named Sophia, had been given to another family, but the adoption had not been the fairy tale that had been expected. Marked by successive abuse and abandonment, Sophia had grown up carrying in her chest the absence of a life that had been stolen from her. Still, instead of sinking into bitterness, she chose perseverance, altruism, and hope. She spent years trying to find Liza, reconstructing fragments of forgotten stories, believing with unshakable faith in the power of goodness and in the right to be one family again. The fear of being rejected prevented her from knocking directly on his door, but the inspiration that came from love and resilience made her create another path, that of letters, which, even through tears, sought to light the spark of reunion. Liza listened to everything with her heart in tatters, her eyes filled with emotions that could not find enough words to express themselves. She felt in each sentence spoken the honesty of someone who survived without letting love die, the sincerity of someone who still believed in reconciliation even in the face of such a cruel past. It was impossible not to be moved by the raw humanity of that story, full of mistakes, yes, but also full of hope and compassion. The anger that she might have once felt dissolved in the perception of the silent struggle that her sister had fought. There, among the wreckage of the past and the tears of the present, Liza understood that forgiveness, the true kind, was born not from perfection, but from the recognition of the courage and silent struggle that they both shared without knowing it. The reunion between Liza and Sophia was not just about hugs and tears. It was also a process full of discomfort, heavy silences, and uncertain looks. After all, how do you rebuild a bond that never had time to grow? How do you reconcile a story fragmented by fear, loneliness, and insecurity? Each conversation between them was an exercise in empathy, courage, and humility. There were times when emotion would explode unexpectedly, when words would get stuck in their throats, and all they could offer each other was the silent affection of someone who understands their pain without having to explain it. It took resilience to not give up in the face of differences, and wisdom to embrace the imperfections that time had sown in their trajectories. In the following weeks, Liza and Sophia began to meet regularly in an improvised ritual of reconstruction. There were long afternoons in discreet coffee shops, silent walks in quiet squares, moments filled with humanity and sincerity. At each reunion, a new story was told, a new piece fitted into this delicate puzzle of love, compassion, and forgiveness. Some conversations ended in shy laughter, other encounters in silent tears. It was an emotional adventure without a script, where both learned at each step that true reconciliation requires patience, honesty, and above all, hope. Even with fear lurking, they knew they were on a path from which they no longer wanted to deviate. Liza began to realize that, despite everything they had lost, what really mattered was what they could still build together. the stolen childhood, the years apart, the bonds broken by fate. All of this still hurt, of course, but it was also the fuel for a new story. It was as if, through the pain, they had both discovered a type of love that transcends time and absence, a love made of compassion, courage, and the ability to see humanity in each other, even when the scars still bleed. Gratitude for having been given this new chance mixed with the inspiration of knowing that, despite everything, they had chosen to stay. And although the road was still long, Liza felt, for the first time in a long time, that hope had once again taken up residence in her chest. Liza's new life began slowly, like someone learning to walk again after years without using the legs of their heart. Each dawn next to Sophia was a silent reminder of the courage they both had in not giving up on each other. The mornings, once silent and filled with solitude, were now filled with shy laughter, sincere plans and small doses of hope that rekindled her spirit. The compassion that was born between them, tempered by understanding and humility, gave new meaning to the words family and home. And even when fear, insecurity, and the shadow of the past threatened to invade, the power of kindness that they built together served as an invisible shield, protecting the trust that flourished there every day. Liza's story was now divided into two very clear chapters, before and after the letters. Before, she walked through life as if serving a silent sentence, trying to balance forgotten dreams and habitual loneliness. Later, she understood that the true human adventure begins when we accept that we are made of fragments, of courage and fear, of wounds and forgiveness, of hope and resilience. It took losing and finding again for her to see the depth of humanity that exists in each of us. The gratitude she felt now was immense, and love, previously a somewhat abstract concept, had become a daily gesture. In every coffee shared, in every spontaneous hug, in every new step taken side by side with Sophia. And so, even without guarantees, Liza chose to embrace this new beginning. She knew that there would still be difficult days, but she also knew that the perseverance, empathy, and honesty gained along the way would be her greatest allies. The inspiration to move forward now came from something much stronger than pain. It came from the certainty that love, when cultivated with respect and kindness, is capable of transforming even the deepest scars into bridges to reconciliation. For the first time in a long time, Liza was not just dreaming, she was allowing herself to live. And deep down, she felt that regardless of the next chapters, the choice to believe in the power of kindness had changed her destiny forever. How many letters from life have you ignored out of fear of the unknown? How many opportunities for reconciliation, understanding, and hope have been left behind because fear spoke louder than courage? Liza's story teaches us that the past, no matter how painful, carries within it the seed of liberation. What haunts us can also heal us if we have the humility to listen and the resilience to face it. Perhaps at this very moment, there are invisible letters trying to reach you. Forgotten dreams, lost bonds, open wounds that only love, compassion, and the power of kindness can heal. Are you willing to open these letters, or will you continue to pretend that what is unseen does not hurt? Now tell me, how many parts of your story are still hidden, waiting for the courage to be revealed? Would you have the courage to look inside, yourself, to forgive, to rebuild, to start over? True wisdom is not in having all the answers, but in asking the right questions. Could it be that you are, without realizing it, waiting for life to send you a sign, an inspiration, a letter? Do not ignore the whispers of your own heart. Remember, understanding is born from respect for our own humanity. Gratitude blossoms when we accept that even pain can be a silent teacher. Perseverance is built on the daily action of honestly facing what we try to avoid. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect, do not let this transformation end here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come with us to build a community of humanity, respect, and inspiration. Here, each story is an open letter to the power of goodness, to kindness, and to the incredible human capacity to start over. Share this story with those who need the courage to open their own letters, and let's spread this message of love, hope, and reconciliation together. Because in the end, the true adventure of life begins when we stop running away and start listening to what really matters.